Every single one of us faces battles every day, battles that are not always visible to the outside world, but are deeply real within us. These battles often come down to one thing, the constant tug-of war between our mind and our emotions. It is not the circumstances themselves that determine our success or failure, but the way we handle what we feel when those circumstances arrive. And here's the unshakable truth. If you want to win, if you want to create a life of clarity, strength, and purpose, then your mind must be stronger than your emotions. That is the foundation, the cornerstone upon which everything else rests. Think about how emotions show up in your life. One moment you're full of excitement, hope, and belief that the world is in your favor. You feel unstoppable, like everything is finally aligning for you. But in the very next moment, doubt creeps in, fear whispers in your ear, frustration clouds your thoughts, and suddenly the confidence you had is gone. That's the nature of emotions. They rise and fall like unpredictable waves. They don't care about your plans, your goals, or the commitments you made to yourself. They come and go, and when you allow them to take the driver's seat, you lose control of where your life is headed. How many times have you made a decision that you later regretted because you were caught up in what you were feeling in that one heated moment? Maybe you said words in anger that cut someone you cared about. Maybe you made a reckless choice because of fear, or walked away from something important because frustration convinced you it wasn't worth it. In that moment, you probably felt justified, maybe even relieved. But later, when the emotions passed and you were left with nothing but the consequences of that choice, you realized that the decision wasn't made by your best self. It was made by a version of you hijacked by emotions. And that is the danger. When emotions rule, they distort reality. They make something temporary feel permanent. They convince you that the way you feel right now is the way things will always be. And that illusion leads people to quit, to lash out, to sabotage their own progress. But your mind, when strengthened, offers a completely different path. The mind is not impulsive. It doesn't rush to conclusions or jump off the edge without looking. The mind can pause. It can see past the storm of emotion and ask, what is the truth here? What's the bigger picture? What choice will serve me in the long run, not just in this instant? The mind allows you to step outside the chaos of the moment and make decisions from a place of clarity. And that difference between following your emotions and leading with your mind is the difference between a life of regret and a life of strength. This doesn't mean you ignore emotions or pretend they don't exist. Emotions are real. They are human. They are part of what makes life meaningful. Love, joy, passion. These are all emotions too, and they can elevate life in powerful ways. But emotions are not meant to be leaders. They are meant to be messengers. They are signals telling you what you value, what matters, and where you need to pay attention. But the moment you let them take control, the moment you hand over the steering wheel, you lose. The key is to respect your emotions, acknowledge them, but not let them define your reality. Imagine a driver on a winding road. If you let emotions drive, it's like being in a car with no brakes, no control, and no awareness of the cliff up ahead. You'll crash sooner or later. But if your mind is driving, if logic and clarity are at the wheel, the emotions can still be passengers. They can inform you, they can point things out, but they do not dictate where the car goes. You remain in control. Think about a time when you were under immense pressure. Maybe it was an exam that could change your future, an interview that felt like your one shot, or a conflict with someone you loved. In that moment, your emotions wanted to take over. Fear screamed that you weren't enough. Doubt whispered that you were going to fail. Anger pushed you to say things you didn't mean. But if you reflect on those times, the moments when you handled it best, when you made the right choice, when you didn't regret what you said or did, were the times when your mind stepped in, when you paused, breathed, and chose to act with intention instead of reaction. That is the essence of strength. It's easy to underestimate how powerful this shift can be. Every single time you let your emotions control you, you give away your power. Every time fear dictates your choices, you choose to stay small. Every time anger drives your decisions, you sacrifice clarity. Every time frustration makes you quit, You abandon the progress you've worked for. But the good news is that your mind, like a muscle, can be trained. You can strengthen it through practice, through discipline, through awareness. Each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you breathe instead of lashing out, each time you choose clarity over chaos, you are building your mental strength. And just like lifting weights builds physical strength over time, choosing your mind over emotions builds mental resilience that will serve you in every part of your life. The truth is, emotions will always be part of life. You cannot eliminate fear or anger or sadness. They are part of the human experience, but you can rise above them. You can learn to see them for what they are: temporary states that do not define you, that do not control your destiny. And once you see that clearly, once you recognize that you are not a victim of what you feel in a single moment, you begin to step into your real power. You begin to lead your life with intention. This isn't about perfection. You won't always get it right. There will be days when emotions overwhelm you, when frustration feels endless, when fear feels all-consuming. Those days are real and they will come. But the difference between those who crumble and those who thrive is not whether emotions appear, it's how they respond when they do. Do they surrender their power to the wave, or do they let their mind anchor them until the wave passes? That choice, repeated again and again, is what builds a life of strength. The battle between mind and emotion is not fought once. It is fought every day, in small moments, in ordinary decisions, in the way you handle the unexpected. And every day, you have a choice. You can hand over control to your emotions and let them drive you into chaos, or you can choose to strengthen your mind, take the wheel and guide your life with clarity. One path leads to regret. The other leads to growth, resilience, and true control. And when you realize that you don't have to be ruled by what you feel in a fleeting moment, when you understand that you have the power to rise above the storm, that is when you stop being a passenger in your own life and start becoming the driver. That is when you step into your true strength. That is when your life begins to change. Life is full of moments that test us, moments when pressure rises, when tension fills the air, when emotions scream for our attention. In these moments, the choice we make often comes down to one simple question: do we react or do we respond? At first, it may seem like the two are the same. After all, both involve taking action. But there is a world of difference between reacting and responding, and that difference can shape the entire direction of your life. To react is to give away your power. Reacting means you are a puppet to your emotions, pulled by strings you cannot see, controlled by the rush of anger, the sting of fear, or the weight of frustration. It happens instantly, without thought, without clarity. A reaction is raw and unfiltered. It's the sharp word, spoken in anger, that you wish you could take back the moment it leaves your lips. It's the rash decision, made in fear, that later feels foolish. It's the door you slammed shut without considering what was on the other side. A reaction is easy. It requires no discipline, no strength, no awareness. It's simply allowing whatever you feel in that moment to take the wheel and drive your behavior. But to respond, that is an entirely different level of living. A response is deliberate. It comes not from impulse, but from intention. It begins with a pause, even if just for a moment, where you breathe, where you allow the storm of emotions to settle before you act. A response is measured, calm, calculated. It is not about ignoring what you feel, but about making sure that what you feel does not dictate the decision you make. When you respond instead of react, you are in control. You are the one holding the strings. You are no longer the passenger being tossed around by emotions. You are the driver deciding where to go. Think about how many times in your own life reacting has led you to regret. Maybe it was in an argument where the heat of the moment pushed you to say something you didn't truly mean. The words came out sharp, cutting, filled with anger, and for a moment it felt like release. But later, when the emotion passed, you wished you had chosen differently. Or maybe it was a decision fueled by fear, an opportunity you didn't take because doubt screamed louder than courage, a door you closed because the emotion of the moment convinced you that you weren't ready. Reaction often feels powerful in the moment, but in reality, it strips you of power. It leaves you at the mercy of feelings that are temporary. Now imagine what it looks like to respond instead. Picture yourself in the same argument, but instead of lashing out, you pause. You take a breath. You remind yourself that anger is temporary, that this moment of tension does not need to define the relationship. And then you choose your words with care, speaking not from rage but from clarity. The outcome is entirely different. Or imagine that opportunity you once turned down. This time, when fear rises, you don't let it control you. You acknowledge it, but you let your mind step in and remind you of your goals, your preparation, your vision for the future. And instead of retreating, you move forward. That is the difference between reacting and responding. One gives power away, the other claims it back. Life is filled with situations that tempt us to react. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker says something that feels disrespectful. A family member presses the exact button they know will get under your skin. In those moments, the emotion rises instantly. Anger, irritation, frustration, and everything in you wants to react. But every time you do, you hand over control of your life to forces outside yourself. You give a stranger on the road the power to dictate your peace. You give one careless word from another person the ability to decide how you will feel for the rest of the day. You let external circumstances control your inner world. And if you let that cycle repeat, your life becomes a series of reactions, a series of impulsive responses to whatever happens around you, rather than a life guided by your own clarity and purpose. But when you train yourself to respond, you break that cycle. You begin to understand that between the emotion you feel and the action you take, there is a gap. That gap is where your power lies. That gap is the pause. In that pause, you breathe, you think, you assess, you remind yourself of your bigger goals, of who you want to be, of what outcome you truly want. And from that place of strength, you choose your response. Imagine how different your life becomes when you begin living this way. Imagine the peace you would carry if every time frustration rose, you paused instead of reacting. Imagine the opportunities you would seize if every time fear tried to hold you back, you let your mind, not your emotion, make the decision. This is not an easy practice. It takes discipline to pause. It takes strength to breathe when every part of you wants to explode, when every nerve is screaming for action. But it is in that pause that greatness is forged. Champions are not those who never feel emotion. They feel it just as much as anyone else. Champions are the ones who have trained their minds to stay calm in the storm, to respond when others would react. Think of a boxer in the middle of the ring. The crowd is screaming. The opponent is throwing punches. The body is tired and in pain. Emotions in that moment scream for survival, for panic, for lashing out wildly. But the great fighter doesn't just react. The great fighter responds. He breathes, he assesses, he sees the opening, and he acts with precision. That discipline, that control, that refusal to be ruled by emotion is what creates victory. And the same is true in your life. Every day is a kind of arena. Every conversation, every challenge, every setback is a test. Will you react and let emotion run the show, or will you respond with clarity and strength? The difference may seem small in the moment. A pause, a breath, a choice of words. But over time, it changes everything. It changes relationships, because instead of letting anger destroy connection, you choose understanding. It changes your career, because instead of letting fear stop you, you take bold steps forward. It changes your peace of mind, because instead of being tossed around by every wave of emotion, you learn to anchor yourself in clarity. Responding is not about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. It's about allowing yourself to feel, but not letting those feelings decide the course of your life. It's about recognizing that while you cannot always control what happens around you, you can always control how you choose to deal with it. That choice is where true freedom lies. So the next time you feel the urge to lash out, to retreat, to act without thinking, remember that you are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of your emotions. Between the feeling and the action, there is space. In that space, you have the power to choose. And every time you choose to respond instead of react, you are strengthening your mind, reclaiming your power, and shaping a life that is guided not by chaos, but by clarity. That is the path of strength. That is the path of true control. Throughout history, the people we admire most, the ones whose stories inspire generations, are not those who never faced hardship, but those who mastered their minds in the middle of struggle. They are the proof that while emotions are powerful, the mind, when disciplined, when strengthened, is far more powerful. Their lives remind us that the difference between greatness and defeat is not talent alone, not luck, not circumstances, but the ability to rise above the waves of emotion and choose clarity, discipline, and focus in the face of challenge. Take the story of Michael Jordan. As a teenager, he faced rejection that would have broken many others. He was cut from his high school basketball team, told that he wasn't good enough. Imagine the emotions that must have risen in that moment, the sting of disappointment, the frustration, the doubt whispering that maybe he should give up, that maybe this dream wasn't for him. For most people, those emotions would have been enough to end the story right there. The pain of failure would have hardened into belief, and the belief would have shaped a life of mediocrity. But Jordan chose differently. He didn't allow rejection to define him. He didn't give his emotions the final word. Instead, he turned inward, to something stronger than the sting of the moment, his mind. He trained himself to see rejection not as proof of inadequacy, but as fuel for determination. Every time doubt whispered, he responded with discipline. Every time frustration tried to take over, he chose focus. Over the years, it wasn't just his physical skills that made him extraordinary. It was his mental toughness. When the pressure was highest, when the crowd roared, when the weight of the game rested on his shoulders, he didn't panic. He didn't crumble under the storm of emotions that would overwhelm others. He trusted his mind, his preparation, his clarity, and because of that, he didn't just become good, he became the best. His story is proof that talent without mental strength crumbles, but even ordinary talent, when paired with an unshakable mind, can reach extraordinary heights. Now consider Nelson Mandela. His story is one of the most profound examples of mind over emotion that the world has ever seen. For 27 long years, he was imprisoned, stripped of freedom, separated from his loved ones, beaten down by injustice. Imagine the emotions that must have lived inside him during those years. The anger, the resentment, the bitterness. Anyone in his position would have been justified in giving in to hate, in letting revenge consume them. When he finally walked out of prison, he had every reason to lash out, to react with the full force of anger toward those who had wronged him. That would have been the expected response, and no one would have blamed him for it. But Mandela understood something most people never grasp. He understood that to give in to anger, to let hatred rule, would not just enslave him again. It would enslave his people in an endless cycle of revenge. So he chose differently. He chose forgiveness. He chose peace. He chose his mind over his emotions. That decision didn't erase the pain of the past, but it created the possibility of a future. It gave South Africa a chance at healing, and it gave the world a model of true leadership. His story reminds us that the greatest strength is not found in retaliation, but in restraint. It is not in reacting with hate, but in responding with vision. That kind of strength doesn't come from emotion, it comes from the mind. And think about how rare that is. Most people let emotions dictate their lives. They let rejection become proof that they're not good enough. They let anger destroy relationships. They let fear hold them back from opportunities. But the great ones, the leaders, the legends, the people who leave a mark on the world, they don't hand over the wheel to their emotions. They feel them, yes, but they don't let them decide the direction of their lives. They use their mind to take control, to pause, to respond, to choose a path that leads to growth instead of destruction. What these stories teach us is that emotions are temporary. The sting of failure fades. The rush of anger passes. The weight of fear lightens with time. But the decisions you make in those moments, those remain. If you let emotions lead you, you'll make choices that don't align with your true values, choices that leave scars. But if you let your mind lead, if you pause and respond with clarity, those decisions build a foundation for greatness. Michael Jordan could have let disappointment end his story before it began. Instead, he chose to let his mind transform rejection into determination. Nelson Mandela could have allowed anger to define him after 27 years of injustice. Instead, he chose forgiveness, peace, and leadership. And here's the thing. You don't have to be a global icon or a sports legend for these lessons to apply. The same principle is true in your everyday life. Think about the last time you faced rejection. Maybe it was a job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, a project that failed. In that moment, your emotions probably screamed at you, "You're not good enough. You'll never succeed. This is hopeless." And if you listened, if you reacted by giving up, you reinforced those emotions and allowed them to shape your life. But imagine if instead you paused. Imagine if you let your mind speak louder than your emotions. Imagine if you said, "This is not the end, this is fuel. This is an opportunity to grow stronger, to learn, to come back better." How different would your life look if every rejection became fuel instead of defeat? Or think about the last time someone wronged you. Maybe they hurt you, disrespected you, betrayed you. The emotion of the moment probably told you to lash out, to cut them off, to let bitterness take root. But what happens when you do that? You carry the weight of anger long after the moment has passed. You let someone else's action continue to control your peace. But what if, like Mandela, you chose forgiveness? What if you responded instead of reacted? That doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means refusing to let anger rule your life. It means choosing freedom over chains. The truth is, the stories of great leaders are not just history lessons. They are mirrors. They show us what is possible when the mind is stronger than emotion. They remind us that while emotions are real, they are not final. They come and go, but the mind can create something lasting. Greatness is not reserved for a select few. It is available to anyone willing to do the work of strengthening the mind, of pausing in the storm, of choosing response over reaction. So the question is, when your moment comes, because it will, what will you choose? When rejection stings, will you let it break you, or will you let it fuel you like Jordan did? When anger burns, will you let it consume you, or will you rise above it like Mandela? When emotions scream for control, will you surrender to them, or will you take a breath, center yourself, and let your mind lead the way? That choice made again and again is what defines greatness. Every single day, life presents you with choices. Some of them are small and seem insignificant at first. What you say in a heated conversation, how you handle a small disappointment, how you react to a minor frustration. Others are much larger, decisions about your career, your relationships, your future. But whether big or small, all of these choices are shaped by the same battle. Will you let your emotions decide for you, or will you let your mind take the lead? This is not a question you answer once and then move on. It is a question you must answer again and again, every day, in every situation. And the way you answer it is what shapes the course of your life. The truth about emotions is simple. They are temporary. They feel permanent when you're in them. They feel overwhelming and all-consuming, but they always pass. Think about the last time you were angry, really angry. In that moment, it felt like the world was burning, like that anger would last forever, but it didn't. The fire eventually cooled. Or think about the last time you were afraid. Fear gripped you, convinced you that you couldn't move forward, that the risk was too great. And yet, eventually, the fear faded, or sadness. What felt unbearable in the moment eventually softened with time. This is the nature of emotions. They rise and they fall, like waves crashing against the shore. Some are small ripples, easy to manage. Others are towering, powerful waves that threaten to pull you under. But no matter how strong, no matter how overwhelming, the waves always recede. They are never permanent. What is permanent, however, are the choices you make in the middle of those waves. When anger floods your system and you lash out, the words you speak may linger long after the anger is gone. When fear convinces you to walk away from an opportunity, the opportunity doesn't return just because the fear faded. When frustration pushes you to quit, the progress you abandoned doesn't magically reappear when the frustration passes. The emotion ends, but the consequences of the reaction remain. That is why choosing your mind over your emotions matters so much. Your emotions are temporary, but your choices are lasting. So how do you do it? How do you strengthen your mind so that, in the heat of the moment, you can rise above emotions and respond with clarity? It begins with awareness. The simple act of noticing when you are being pulled by your feelings gives you power. Too often, people act without awareness. They let anger control their words before they even realize they're angry. They let fear dictate their decisions before they recognize they're afraid. But when you pause long enough to name what you are feeling, I am angry, I am afraid, I am frustrated, you create distance between yourself and the emotion. You remind yourself that what you are experiencing is not who you are, but something you are feeling. And feelings, as powerful as they may seem, are always temporary. From that awareness comes the pause. The pause is the space where transformation happens. It is the breath you take before speaking words you can't take back. It is the moment of silence before you make a decision you might regret. It is the space where you let the wave of emotion rise without letting it sweep you away. In that pause, you give your mind the chance to step in. You allow logic, reason, and clarity to rise above the noise of emotion. And in that space, you find the power to respond instead of react. Mindfulness is a tool that strengthens this pause. It's not about pretending life is calm or that emotions don't exist. It's about training yourself to remain steady even when the storm rages around you. When you practice mindfulness, when you train yourself to notice your breath, to ground yourself in the present, to see thoughts and feelings for what they are, you develop the ability to stay centered no matter what chaos surrounds you. Instead of being yanked in every direction by whatever you feel in the moment, you remain anchored. That anchoring gives you the clarity to choose wisely. Another tool is the power of goals. When your mind is fixed on a clear vision of who you want to be and where you want to go, it becomes easier to resist the pull of emotions. Fear may rise, but your mind reminds you of the bigger picture. Anger may tempt you to lash out, but your vision for your life keeps you steady. Frustration may whisper that quitting is easier, but your commitment to your goals keeps you moving forward. Without clear goals, emotions feel bigger than they are. With clear goals, emotions shrink in comparison to the life you are building. And perhaps the most important shift is to stop seeing yourself as a victim of your emotions. Too many people believe they are powerless, that they cannot control how they feel or what they do when feelings hit. But you are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of every wave of emotion. You have the ability to choose. Every time you decide to pause, every time you choose clarity over chaos, every time you let your mind, not your emotions, guide your decision, you are strengthening that ability. And the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. This daily choice may not seem like much at first. Pausing before speaking, taking a breath before deciding, choosing not to quit in frustration. These seem like small victories, but over time they build into something extraordinary. They build resilience, discipline, confidence. They transform you into someone who is no longer tossed around by emotions, but anchored in clarity. And when you live that way consistently, you discover a kind of strength that very few people ever find. Imagine a life where anger no longer controls your words, where fear no longer dictates your choices, where frustration no longer determines your progress. Imagine how much peace you would feel, how many opportunities you would seize, how many relationships you would protect and strengthen. Imagine the confidence of knowing that no matter what emotions rise, you have the ability to rise above them. That is the power of choosing your mind over your emotions every day. This doesn't mean you will never stumble. There will still be days when emotions get the best of you. There will be moments when you react instead of respond, when anger slips out, when fear holds you back, when frustration tempts you to give in. That's part of being human, but the goal is not perfection, it's progress. Every time you choose differently, every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you remind yourself that emotions are temporary and clarity is permanent, you are moving forward. You are building strength. You are shaping a life that reflects not the chaos of your feelings, but the vision of your mind. In the end, the message is simple but profound. You are not a slave to your emotions. You are the master of your fate. The strength is inside you, waiting to be tapped into. And the moment you decide to choose your mind over your emotions, not once, not occasionally, but every single day, you unlock a level of power that nothing and no one can take from you. The storms will come, the waves will rise, the emotions will hit hard, but when your mind is stronger, when you are anchored in clarity, you will not be swept away. You will stand, you will rise, and you will keep moving forward. That is the life available to you if you choose it.